Hi guys, how y'all doing? Welcome back. 2 days left. Well, one day-ish. Until the new year. How excited are you guys? I am super excited because new year, maybe it'll get better, maybe it won't. I hope it will get better though. Anyway, welcome back. I know, this is the most I've posted in a while since I've started and I'm so happy. So you guys will be getting 2 videos today from me. This one, and then one where I just kind of like wrap up the new year. So by the time that gets posted, it'll probably be December 31st. Because it is 10/17 as I'm filming this right now. So today's topic is one of, I probably say this every video, but my personal favorites. We will be discussing Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer. So let's get right into it. Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer who took the lives of 17 men between 1978 and 1991. He is also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal because, yes, I'm sorry guys, he did eat people. So I am going to put a little thing here. This is like your trigger warning or your trigger warning. We do talk about cannibalism, dismemberment, and other just bad topics that if you don't want to hear, then please leave because I don't want to be hated on in the comments for this. So, if you don't like this, then please leave now. I warned you. So Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer who took the lives of 17 different men between 1978 and 1991. Over the course of 13 years, he sought out men, so he was into men, I guess. But they were mostly African American. He would find them at gay bars, malls, and bus stops, and would lure them back to his home with the promises of money or sex. And then he would give them alcohol that was laced with drugs before strangling them to death. He would then engage in sex acts, which I believe that is actually called necrophilia. That is very, very bad. Don't do that. And then he would commit necrophilia, and then he would dismember the bodies and dispose of them. But he often kept their skulls or other body parts as souvenirs. So this guy obviously had a mental problem. That's kind of scary, actually. He frequently took photos of his victims at their various stages of the murder process so he could recollect each act afterwards and relive his experience. Jeffrey Dahmer was captured in 1991 and sentenced to 16 life terms. He was killed by a fellow inmate in 1994, which we will talk about later. This is just kind of like a little general information before I give you all of the gory, juicy details. So Dahmer was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on May 21st, 1960. His parents were Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. As a child, he was described as happy and energetic until the age of 4 when he had to have a surgery to correct a double hernia. Caused an effect in him. Caused a change. He was more quiet. He was noticeably subdued. He became increasingly withdrawn following the birth of his younger brother and the family frequently moving. According to sources, by the age of his early teens, he was disengaged, tense, and largely friendless. Dahmer claims that his compulsions towards necrophilia, which is basically having sex with a dead body, and murder began around the age of 14. But it appears that the breakdown of his parents' marriage and their divorce a few years later may have been the catalyst of turning these thoughts into actions. So while he had these thoughts at the age of 14, when his parents got divorced, sources claim that caused him to turn these thoughts into actions. By the time of his first killing, Dahmer had a really bad alcohol problem. His consumption had spun out of control. He dropped out of Ohio State University after one quarter term. So he didn't even finish his entire semester. So in high school, we have the 9 weeks. He did one of those before dropping out. And a little while later, his father insisted that he join the army. So Dahmer enlisted in late December 1978 and was sent to Germany shortly after that. His drinking problem continued, and in early 1981, the army discharged him. Although German authorities would later investigate possible connections between Dahmer and murders that took place in the area at that time, it is not believed that he took any more victims while he served in the armed forces. I guess that's good. Well, yeah, that's good. Nobody died. Anyway, following his discharge, Dahmer returned to Ohio. An arrest later on in 1981 for disorderly conduct prompted his father to send Dahmer to live with his grandmother in Wisconsin. So he was born in Wisconsin, moved to Ohio, and then moved back to Wisconsin in 1981 to live with his grandma. His alcohol problem continued and was arrested the following summer for indecent exposure. Damn, this guy has issues. He was arrested once again in 1986 when two boys accused him of masturbating in front of them. From this, he received a 1-year probationary sentence. There are some fucked up people in this world. Now we're moving on to Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. So obviously, as I said before, he murdered 17 men between 1978 and 1991. He was careful to select victims on the fringes of society who were often itinerant or borderline criminal, making their disappearances less noticeable and reducing the likelihood of his capture. Actually, there are a lot of people who do this. They'll, serial killers, they'll go and they'll, kill people who are, it's been done before, immigrants, prostitutes, African Americans, not to offend anyone, but that has happened, because they're minorities, or they're less noticeable, and not a lot of people cared about them. So, most people wouldn't be looking for them. He lured them to his home with the promises of money or sex, and then strangled them to death. Obviously, like I said before, he engaged in necrophilia, and kept his body parts and photos as souvenirs. It's not okay. So, his first 4 victims, Dahmer's first murder actually occurred after he graduated high school in June 1978, so he was 18. So he was a year younger than me at the time. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and took him home to his parents' house. They proceeded to get drunk, and when Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer struck him in the head and then strangled him with a barbell. When I was doing my research for this, I was actually like, how the fuck do you kill someone with a barbell? Do you, lay them on the ground or something, or what? I'm not going to get into that, but yeah. So his first victim was Stephen Hicks in 1978, and he was strangled with a barbell. Yeah, I know. Rough. Dahmer dismembered the corpse, packed the body parts in plastic bags, and buried them behind his parents' house. So, this murder happened in his parents' house. And then the victim was buried in the backyard. Yeah, I have a makeup brush because I like the little stuff. He later exhumed the remains, crushed the bones with a sledgehammer, and scattered them across a wooden ravine. It wasn't until September 1987 that Dahmer took his first victim. So there was a skip of about 9 years. Yeah, I think that's right. About 9 years since his killing, since his first killing. His second victim's name was Stephen Tumomi. I hope I didn't butcher that. They checked into a hotel room and they drank. Apparently a lot, because Dahmer awoke to find his victim dead, and he had no memory of the previous night's activities. He brought a large suitcase to transport his victim's body to his grandmother's basement, where he where he dismembered and masturbated on the corpse before disposing of the remains. So, yeah, not a person I want to fuck with. Only after Dahmer killed another 2 victims at his grandmother's home did she tire of her grandson's late night and drunkenness, although she had no knowledge of his other activities, and she forced him to move out in 1998. That September 1989, Dahmer had an extremely lucky escape. An encounter with a 13-year-old Latonian boy resulted in charges of sexual exploitation and second-degree sexual assault for Mr. Dahmer. He pleaded guilty, claiming that the boy had appeared much older. So, like, he was hit with sexual assault charges in 1989. To clear that up. While awaiting sentencing for his sexual assault case, Dahmer again put his grandmother's basement to gruesome use. March 1989, he lured, drugged, and strangled, sodomized, photographed, and dismembered the body of Anthony Sears, who was an aspiring model. Yeah. This is making me sick, actually, kind of talking about it. Do what you do, right? At his trial for child molestation in May 1989, Dahmer was the model of contrition, arguing eloquently in his own defense about how he had seen the error of his ways and that his arrest marked a turning point in his life. His defense counsel argued that he needed treatment, not incarceration, and the judge agreed, handing down a 1-year prison sentence on day release, allowing Dahmer to work at his job during the day and return to the prison at night, as well as a 5-year probationary sentence. Yes, I'm eating my ice cream. Years later, in an interview with CNN, Lionel Dahmer stated that he wrote a letter to the court that issued the sentence, requesting psychological help before his son's parole. However, Dahmer was granted an early release by the judge after only serving 10 months of his sentence. He briefly lived with his grandmother following his release, during what time he does not appear to have added to his body count before moving back into his own apartment. Over the following 2 years, Dahmer's victim count accelerated, bringing his total from 4 to 17. He developed rituals as he progressed, experimenting with chemical means of disposal and often consuming the flesh of his victims. So that's where the cannibal part comes in, because he would eat them. He would, eat the flesh. Dahmer also attempted to create crude lobotomies, drilling into the victims' skulls while they were still alive and injecting them with a type of acid. So basically, from videos that I've watched about this in the past, he actually tried to turn these people into zombies. Like, he tried to make zombies and epically failed and instead killed these people. Like, what the fuck? Oh boy. On May 27th, 1991, Dahmer's neighbor, Sandra Smith, called the police to report that an Asian boy was running naked in the street. When the police arrived, the boy was incoherent and they accepted the word of Dahmer, a white man in a largely poor African American community, that the boy was 19 years old. In fact, the boy was 14 and a brother of the lieutenant dean that Dahmer had molested 3 years earlier. The police escorted Dahmer and the boy home, clearly not wishing to become embroiled in a homosexual domestic disturbance. They took only a cursory look around before leaving. So yeah, he got away. Once the police left the scene, Dahmer killed the boy and proceeded with his usual rituals. Had they conducted an even basic search, police officers would have found the body of Dahmer's 12th victim, Tony Hughes. Before he was finally arrested, Dahmer killed 4 more men. Dahmer's killing spree ended when he was arrested on July 22nd, 1991. The body parts found in Dahmer's refrigerator and Polaroid photographs of his victims became intricately associated with his notorious killing spree. So also, apparently, Jeffrey Dahmer would hide, would store body parts in his fridge. Yikes. Two Milwaukee police officers were led to Dahmer when they picked up Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old African-American man who was wandering the streets with handcuffs dangling from his wrists. They decided to investigate the man's claim that a weird dude had drugged and restrained him. They arrived at Dahmer's apartment, where he calmly offered to get the keys for the handcuffs. Edwards claimed that the knife Dahmer had threatened him with was the one in the bedroom. When the officer went to corroborate the story, he noticed Polaroid pictures of dismembered bodies lying around. Dahmer was then subdued by the officers. Subsequent searches revealed a head in the refrigerator, 3 more in the freezer, and a catalog of other horrors including preserved skulls, jars containing genitalia, and an extensive gallery of macabre Polaroid photos of his victims. So, yeah. In 1996, following Dahmer's death, a group of Milwaukee businessmen raised more than $400,000 to purchase the items he used for his victims, including blades, saws, handcuffs, and a refrigerator to store body parts. They promptly destroyed them in an effort to distance the city from the horrors of Dahmer's actions and ensuing media circus surrounding his trial. So we're now moving on to the trial and his imprisonment. So he obviously had been caught for all of these things that he did. And Dahmer's trial began in January 1992. Given that the majority of Dahmer's victims were African American, there were considerable racial tensions. So strict security precautions were taken, including an 8-foot barrier of bulletproof glass that separated him from the gallery. Like, that's how bad it was. That they literally had to put him between 8 feet of bulletproof glass to protect him so he wouldn't get shot. The inclusion of only one African American on the jury provoked further unrest, but it was ultimately contained and short-lived. Lionel Dahmer and his second wife attended the trial throughout the whole process. Dahmer initially pleaded not guilty to all charges, despite having confessed to the killings during police interrogation. He eventually changed his plea to guilty by virtue of insanity. His defense then offered the gruesome details of his behavior as proof that only someone insane could commit such terrible acts. I mean, I kind of see where they're coming from on that point, because of the fact that who in their right mind would do any of this? So I can kind of see where they're coming from. The jury chose to believe the prosecution's assertion that Dahmer was fully aware of that his acts were evil and chose to commit them anyway. On February 15th, 1992, they returned after approximately 10 hours of deliberation to find him guilty but sane on all counts. He received 15 consecutive life terms in prison, with a 16th term tacked on in May. Okay, so how I see this, in February, he was originally charged with 15. But instead, they added another one at the end of May. Dahmer reportedly adjusted well to prison life, although he initially kept apart from the general population. He eventually convinced authorities to allow him to integrate more fully with the inmates. He found religion in the forms of books and photos sent to him by his father, and was granted permission by the Columbia Correctional Institution to be baptized by a local pastor. So, I guess something good came out of it. Personally, I think he would go to hell anyway. Dahmer was killed on November 28th in 1994 by his fellow prison inmate, Christopher Scarver. In accordance with his regular work details, Dahmer was assigned to work with 2 other convicted murderers, Scarver and Jesse Anderson. After they had been left alone to complete their tasks, the guard returned to find that Scarver had brutally beaten both men with a metal bar from the prison weight room. Dahmer was pronounced dead approximately after an hour. Anderson succumbed to his injuries a day later. In 2015, Scarver spoke to the New York Post about his reasons for killing Dahmer. Scarver alleged that he was disturbed not only by Dahmer's crimes, but by a habit Dahmer had developed by fashioning several limbs from prison food. He had developed of fashioning severed limbs from prison food to antagonize other inmates. Yikes. After being taunted by Dahmer and Anderson during their work details, Garver said that he confronted Dahmer about his crimes before beating the two men to death. He also claimed that the prison guards allowed the murders to happen by leaving them alone. In August 2012, nearly 2 decades after his death, it was reported that Dahmer's childhood home in Bath, Ohio, where he committed his first murder in 1978 and buried the victim's remains, was on the market. Its owner, musician Chris Butler, stated that the property would make a great home as long as the buyer could get past the horror factor. Personally, if I bought a murderer's house, I wouldn't be able to live there. Because, knowing that someone died in that house, brutally no less, because this is the guy he strangled with a barbell. I personally would not be able to live there. In March 2016, Butler put the house up for rent for $8,000 for the week of the Republican National Convention. As of July 17, the house was no longer listed on the market, according to Zillow.com. So, yeah. That's all for today's video, guys. I will see you guys later with the video recapping 2020 and just talking about everything that's been going on personally and around the world. I love you guys so much. Bye!